Is of the kingdom that he has promised to those who love him. It's the poor he promised the kingdom. Not us rich, wealthy people here from our hill. Someone say rich? But you have dishonored the poor. Is it not they who drag you to court? That's the rich people who carry you to court, not the poor people, they can't afford it. Is it not they who drag you to court? Is it not they who blaspheme the excellent name that was invoked over you? How did Jesus regard the poor? Remember the Beatitudes in St. Luke? He said, "Blessed are the poor. The kingdom of God is theirs." Luke says, "Blessed are the poor." Matthew says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." But if you read Luke's gospel, it is so much different from the other gospels because it focuses on the poor. It focuses on the downtrodden. It gives them voice. Listen to what Luke says about Jesus in chapter 4 and verse 18. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the people." Came to listen to Jesus, but they were hungry. What did Jesus do? He took the little food that one boy had and he fed all of them. What a miracle. But Jesus couldn't preach to them on hungry stomachs. He couldn't. He knew they were in need. And then we read the gospel about the Syrophoenician woman. She was a Gentile. But she had a child who was sick. She knew Jesus could heal the child, and she came to Jesus and said, "Please, heal my daughter." You know what Jesus said to her? It's one of the toughest stories in the gospel. Jesus said to her, "The children got to eat first. It is not fair to take the children's food and give it to the dogs." Now, that woman was like, right there and then Jesus was going to know what time of the day it was. Who you calling God? Just because I'm a Gentile, they're going to treat, but that's exactly how the Gentiles were treated by the Jews, like dogs. But somehow I believe Jesus knew within his spirit there was something bold and special about this woman, and nothing he could say could turn her away. And she was just his match. "Yes, Lord. I know you're going to give the first piece of chicken and fish and dumpling and salad, potato, and everything else to children, right? Because they're children. Be just, be dogs. Be under the table. But Lord, I'm begging you, when the children eat, sometimes little crumbs fall on the ground, and we get something to eat. I ain't asking for no plate. I'm not asking to sit at the table, Jesus. I just want the crumbs that have fallen from your children's plate on the ground. That's all I want. Heal my daughter." Jesus said, "Woman, because of your faith, be it done." And it was done. The poor was special for Jesus. The poor have always been special for God. You know, the early church in Acts chapter 2, they sold all their possessions, all that they had, and they made it a habit, selling their property and then distributing it to all those who were in need. Y'all worry about GST? The new law is going to be sell all your land, sell all your houses, and you'll give it to the poor people in that world. Amen? No, I don't work for the government. Take it easy. I'm not going to pick up the stones yet to stone me. But just imagine, there might have been a special reason why the early church, the early Christians did that. They sold their property and gave the proceeds to the poor. You know what happened to one man who was from who decided, hey, thank me? He said he would give half to the church and keep the other half for himself. He and his wife cook up that seed. And when the apostles called him in and said, look, I see you sold the property and you brought proceeds, but something tells me this ain't all the money. The man said, yes, this is all. He was struck down with a heart attack one time, dead, right there in the church. The poor wife didn't know she was late, didn't get her in time, so she had to walk. That was a nice thing. Okay, forgive you for that one. Forgive him? Thanks. She didn't know what happened. She came late. Yeah? So they asked her, what happened to the money? She said, but we give everything. And the preacher said, see the people there? They just carried out your husband and buried him. They come to you. She dropped them dead too. I make up that story, it's in the Bible. They understood this to be Jesus' way of ministry. He cared for the poor. He looked out for those who were marginalized and downtrodden. And interestingly, throughout history, two systems emerged which kind of captured this principle of Jesus in some way. Socialism and later communism. I know in the church you don't want to hear those two words, because nothing about those two words sound like Christianity. And that's how they have been painted. And that's how they evolved. Because socialism was about making sure that everything belonged to everybody. Right? So they sold what they had and gave it to the poor. That's what the disciples were doing, right? That's the Jesus way. Socialism is about that. Communism took it a step further. Because people are resisting to sell their property and to give it to the poor, communism came in and said, if you don't, we're going to kill you and take it from you. And so there was a lot of slaughtering. Millions of people died who resisted the Communist Party when it came into being in Russia. Because the communism believed everything should belong to the people, the poor. Because there was a big gap between those who were rich and those who were poor. So the Communist parties felt, we are going to take everything that you have. You own a factory, you own a farm, you own whatever. We're going to take it from you, and as the government, we're going to own it so that the people get all the profit, not just one family. Of course, it did more. That was a good idea. Well, I don't know. Until they start killing people and taking their property. But that's what communism was about. We take Holy Communion, we're going to do that, right? It's about fellowship, all on one accord. We are one level here, so. You may be my boss tomorrow, but right now, we are on the same level in communion with each other and with God. And that's where communism came from. But it went bad. And other things got involved. They got right the part about there being no rich and no poor. At least in theory. But the only way they could make it happen was to get rid of the rich. And that's where the problem came in. They wanted to make sure that nobody was left behind. They did it by starving out the people, and millions of people died. They got the caring rights, but everything else was demonic and cruel. So, in reaction to that, we had the Western world, England and America and the others, who embraced democracy, who embraced capitalism, and they wrapped it in Christianity, or they took Christianity and wrapped it in democracy and capitalism. What are the two? So that to be Christian meant you had to believe in democracy, not communism. To be Christian means you had to believe in capitalism, where everybody has a chance to do what they want. And it's up to you if you want to succeed. But here's the sad thing. Capitalism did not focus on the poor, but on the ability of those who could to rise up out of poverty and achieve success and wealth. Capitalism, unlike socialism and communism, capitalism was about how does one achieve success and wealth at any cost. In the process, those who were lazy and had no ambition were scorned because they made no effort to lift themselves up. And that is one belief system which is attributed to the Republicans in America. Right? Who don't believe in welfare? You want something, go work for it. That's the Republican way. The Democratic Party decided, no, we got to look out for the poor, we must have social security, we must have welfare, we must have all these things to take care of those people at the bottom of the plate, the society. It was their strategy. And they were called social, synonymous with evil, words against Christianity. How ironic, right? Jesus was about the poor and caring for the poor. But now the tables are turned. Christianity is about, we know you are Christian because you are blessed. And so we have the Central America say, no, that's not it. That's not Christian. And the Roman Catholic Church, the priests and the bishops in Central America started to rise up and to speak out against the injustice of the rich and the wealthy and the powerful who were oppressing the poor. They spoke out against it. And they were labeled communists. And that's when all of the American CIA went into Central America to uproot the governments and the church and everything else there because they were communists. I ain't supporting nobody, I'm just reporting history. Yeah? The Central American Catholic priests challenged the wealthy Christians. They challenged them and said, God always sided with the poor. The good news of the gospel was to be preached to the poor. That Jesus said, blessed are the poor, and God's judgment was against the rich and powerful who oppressed and took advantage of the poor. And you know what this gave rise to? Something called liberation theology. And that gave rise to something called Caribbean theology. And that's when all the Caribbean churches and people and countries decide they want independence, no more England. Caribbean theology nurtured that movement in the 60s, 50s and 60s, when a number of the islands in the Caribbean gained independence. Because of this movement, there was black theology. And that's when Martin Luther King and all the others came up. And the civil rights movement started in the 60s. It was during this time that the church was rising up and saying, no, Christianity is about the poor. Reaching out to the poor, preaching hope and love to the poor, not abusing them. And that gave rise to the women's movement, when the women feel they were being oppressed by the men. So not just the black now. The white women and the black women joined together because now the women were being abused by the men. The men got paid for the same job twice as much as the women. So women's movements and women's rights started up, and then you have all the other rights, which we now have. Right? Everybody got rights. That's where we are today. But you know, this isn't the first time something like this happened. Back in the 13th and 14th and 15th and 1600s, something similar to this happened, which led to what was known as the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, and the whole world changed. It turned upside down. Before that time, everything the church, everything the preacher said was the truth. There was nothing else to challenge it. Everything the church said was true, and everybody accepted it throughout the then known world. The church was the truth until the Renaissance. You know what happened in the Renaissance? And as I say it, I want you to think, reflect, and see if it sounds familiar. Everything the church said and taught was accepted as the truth. It was never questioned. But then you had a new set of people started to rise up, and with the introduction of the printing press, that's when they started to print books and stuff. The masses now could read. And with that, people became independent thinkers. They started writing. So everybody was writing books now about what they think about the world, what they think about God, what they think about the planets and the stars and everything else. There was a wide awakening of what is truth. The truth from the church was being challenged by everybody everywhere. And then science became true. So it's not what preachers say, it's what we can prove. And that's when science took over. And everything now was the scientist this and the scientist said that, and the science this and the science that. It started back then. With the Industrial Revolution, the Renaissance, when people's eyes were opened up to all kinds of different things which they never knew of before. And they challenged the dogma of the church. They could now think for themselves. They're writing their own ideas, their own theories in books were published, and everybody everywhere could read them. What was the end result? Renaissance. What about that sounds familiar today? 1960 started Renaissance 2.0, which has now come full bloom in 2020, 2021. With the birth of the internet, like the printing press, now everybody got knowledge and wisdom and understanding at their fingertips. And with the birth of social media, now everybody got a platform to say what they believe and what they think is right, and who wrong and who this and the rest of it. Sound like a Renaissance again to you? Sounds so to me. This is Renaissance 2.0. Yeah? And it all came about an answer to the question, what if it isn't so? What if what the church says isn't so? What if what science says isn't so? Isn't the same thing being said today? As scientists are being ridiculed and criticized about what they're saying, and they're being challenged, the earth is no longer round. That's the new big thing. And you learn that stuff in school, right? The earth is round, you got a big globe. That's fake news. That's what they say, okay? So, children, the earth is still round, okay? But you got a lot of people today saying that what they run no more. Yeah, the earth flat. There's no such thing as space. And said I went on the moon, that was fake. The pictures were taken in California with a man jumping, saying he on the moon. That's what they're saying now. Science is not true anymore. Another renaissance has come into place. The church's voice has no meaning or power or respect anymore. Nobody believes what the preacher says. You don't have to believe what I'm saying this morning. Right? Because you can go home and Google anything you want, don't find the truth for yourself. Here's the problem. When I was in college and I used to work in the archives, the archive had a website where people can go and dig up all the missionary stuff from whenever. But you know what I discovered? There was a computer in an office that was always on, and that was always on the internet, so you can find it. So you may think that all this truth that you're reading on Google is coming from some university? No. You got somebody down Benzes with a computer, type up everything he wants, put it on the internet 24/7 so you can find it. And you have no clue where he is. But it's the truth because Google says so. Hmm? Everything nowadays, Google says so. So only the feeble-minded and the weak not believe what the preacher says. Because we can get up on the radio and challenge any preacher. We can challenge anything that anybody says. I don't care how much degrees you got after your name, and how long you've been working as a scientist, you're stupid. And how I know? Google says stupid. Isn't that the truth today? You don't listen to the radio? Everybody now can get up and claim they are geniuses. Why? Because they just wake up and have an inspiration and they think so. The Lord told me so last night. How many books in the Bible? You forget? It used to be 66, I know the change. 66, right? Yeah, you been in Sunday school since me. 66 books in the Bible. You know how many books were written from which were chosen those 66? You think it was only those 66 written? Thousands of books. Everybody was writing books. But the church had to set standards and criteria to include it in the Bible. So some of the books were rejected. Some of the books were rejected. Thousands of books were rejected. Why? Because it didn't meet the strict standards set by the church. Who's setting the standards now? There are no standards. Anybody can get up and say what they want and do what they want. Why? Because everything now is fake news. Powerful people are manipulating the weather. You here in Saudi Arabia and can now make rain? Yes. The place was so dry, they designed something that could create clouds and make rain. I don't know how they mean doing it in California where all these fires and things burning in Australia. It ain't making sense to me. But then that may be fake news too. Who knows? Right? It's the rich and the powerful who are manipulating everything. The weather, the climate, the economy, our health. It's all fake. Don't believe it. That's what we're hearing now from every corner of the earth. Even the most remote village with internet experts are emerging, and the rest of us have to figure out what on earth does Jesus want us to do or believe. What is the truth? Meanwhile, thousands are getting sick and dying. Yes? Thousands have lost their jobs because of sickness, because of the pandemic. They are suffering. They can no longer provide for their families. Why are we debating who is true, who's right, and who's fake? They used to be able to rely on and trust the government and trust their health professionals. Now they don't know who to trust. Because we got so many experts telling the new truth. What is the new truth? Everything is fake. That's the only thing that is true today. That's the only thing you can believe. Everything is fake. How you can believe science when I was going to school, we had how many planets? 7 or 8 or something like that. I can't remember. And then the scientists discovered that the last planet, the smallest one, Pluto, is not a planet, it's just a little something. And so the number of planets changed. Scientists change their stories every day. Hence it's fake news. And that is taking over now from science. Science is no longer the standard. We are all liars and schemers, making ourselves rich while the poor continue to suffer and die. And some among us declare it's the last days. Jesus is coming for his world. You hear that too? And the same thing was said when millions were being slaughtered during the slave trade. The millions of people who died coming from Africa. Where do you think the hurricane is still coming? Where they're coming from? Straight out of Africa. That's our ancestors still crying over what happened, and they touched every one of the islands looking for their descendants. They want to know where we are, so they come in and then vex. And we gotta pray and ask God to send the spirits that way, the hurricanes that way. But I saw a picture last night of about 6 or 7 more lined up coming. The Sahara dust, this is the ashes of our ancestors coming to look for us. Don't know where we are. You think the joke? Ask them. The same thing was said when millions were wiped out with the rise of communism. That Jesus is coming for these people. But we still here. So what are you trying to say, preacher?